December 22nd, 1944. 14:10 hours, 4 kilometers southeast of Bastogne, Belgium. Captain Thomas Wells kicked open the frozen barn door, and 23 German soldiers stared back at him. For 5 seconds, nobody moved. Wells stood in the doorway with his medical bag in one hand and a flashlight in the other. The Germans lay scattered across the floor like broken dolls. Some were unconscious. Some were shivering so violently their teeth rattled. One man near the back was trying to sit up but did not have the strength. They were prisoners of war, wounded, forgotten, dying. Wells should have closed the door and walked away, should have pretended he never saw them. But he was a doctor, and doctors did not walk away from dying men, even enemy soldiers. Even when walking away was the smart choice. He stepped inside. The temperature was maybe 10 degrees warmer than outside, which meant it was still cold enough to kill. His breath came out in clouds. The Germans watched him with expressions that ranged from fear to confusion to desperate hope. One of them spoke. Blonde hair, blue eyes, maybe 25 years old, blood seeping through bandages wrapped around his chest. Bitte helfen Sie uns. Please help us. Wells looked at the man, looked at the other 22, did the math in his head. He had 3 bottles of plasma left, a dozen pressure bandages, some sulfa powder, maybe enough morphine for 4 or 5 doses. He could stabilize maybe half of them if he worked fast, or he could walk away and let them all die. He heard footsteps behind him, turned. Corporal Eddie Reeves stood in the doorway. Reeves was 23 years old, from Tennessee, had been a medic for 11 months. Good kid, followed orders, believed in the mission. "What are you doing, sir?" Reeves asked. "These men need medical attention." Reeves stared at him. "Sir, those are Germans. I know what they are. We got orders to evacuate. Major Garrett said leave them. I am not leaving them. Sir, we got our own guys dying. Morrison is barely holding on. Jenkins is going to lose his leg if we do not get him to a field hospital. And you want to use supplies on enemy soldiers?" Wells set down his medical bag, started unpacking bandages. "I am a doctor corporal. I took an oath to treat anyone who needs help. That includes them." Reeves' voice went hard. "That oath does not mean anything when they were shooting at us 3 days ago. Those men are the reason Morrison has shrapnel in his guts, the reason half our guys are dead. And you want to save them? Yes. That is crazy, sir. Then it is crazy." Reeves stood there for another few seconds. Then he shook his head and walked out. Wells worked alone. He moved from German to German, checked pulses, assessed wounds, triaged who could be saved and who was beyond help. The blond man with the chest wound was critical but stable if he got plasma. 2 others had compound fractures that needed splinting. One had a belly wound that was infected and probably fatal. While he worked, he heard voices outside, angry voices. Reeves was telling the other medics what Wells was doing. Private First Class Anthony Dominguez said something about court-martial. Someone else said the word traitor. Wells ignored them. He had 23 lives to save and maybe 90 minutes before the German tanks arrived. He started with the blond man, chest wound, sucking sound when he breathed, which meant punctured lung. Wells cut away the field dressing someone had applied 3 days ago. The wound was infected, red streaks spreading from the entry point. Without treatment, the man would be dead by nightfall. Wells cleaned the wound with what little alcohol he had left. The Germans screamed. Wells kept working, applied sulfa powder, fresh bandages. Then he pulled out one of his 3 remaining bottles of plasma. He should not be using it on an enemy soldier. He knew that. But the man was dying, and Wells had the means to save him, and walking away felt like murder. He started the IV. The German's eyes fluttered open. They were gray, exhausted. "Danke," the man whispered. "Thank you." "What is your name?" Wells asked in rough German. "Kurt. Kurt Zimmerman." "Where are you from, Kurt?" "Hamburg." "You speak German?" "A little." "Not well. What unit are you?" Zimmerman closed his eyes, did not answer. Wells adjusted the plasma drip. "I am trying to help you, Kurt, but I need information. I am a prisoner. Geneva Convention says I only give name, rank, and serial number. Geneva Convention also says prisoners get medical care. I am giving you that care. You give me information." Zimmerman opened his eyes, looked at Wells with something like understanding. "You are not doing this from kindness. You want intelligence. I am doing it because you will die otherwise. The intelligence is payment. For saving my life? For using American supplies to save your life, while my own men are dying 50 meters away." Zimmerman stared at the ceiling. His breathing was shallow. The plasma was helping, but slowly. "What do you want to know? Where is your division now? Why does it matter? You are evacuating. We heard the orders. By tonight, this whole sector will be German again. Maybe. Or maybe we stop you. Depends on where your tanks are." Zimmerman smiled. It was a bitter smile. "You think I will tell you that? So you can kill my brothers? I think you will tell me that so I do not walk away and let you freeze to death." They stared at each other. Two men on opposite sides of a war that neither of them had started. Wells could see Zimmerman calculating, trying to decide if his life was worth the lives of his comrades. Finally, Zimmerman spoke. 12 SS Panzer Division, 3 kilometers north of here, 8 tanks, 2 Panther, 6 Panzer IV, low on fuel, waiting for resupply before the next push west. Wells memorized it. "What about artillery?" Zimmerman closed his eyes again. "I am very tired. Where is the artillery, Kurt?" 2 batteries, 1.5 kilometers northeast, 105 millimeter howitzers, maybe 12 guns total. Wells nodded, kept working, moved to the next German, fractured femur, bone sticking through the skin. Wells had seen 100 compound fractures in 3 years of war. This one was bad, but treatable. He splinted it, gave the man water, asked more questions, got more answers. By the time he finished with the 5th German, it had been 40 minutes. Outside he could hear engines. The trucks were loading. The evacuation was starting. He needed to move faster. Then he heard someone running. The barn door slammed open. It was Reeves again. His face was white. "Sir, you need to come now. Morrison is crashing." Wells looked up from the German he was bandaging. "What happened?" "Internal bleeding. He is coughing up blood. Dominguez says maybe 15 minutes. Wells stood. Morrison was 19 years old. Had gotten 3 bottles of plasma an hour ago. Should have been stable. But war did not care about should. He looked at the Germans, looked at Reeves, made a choice he would regret for the rest of his life. "I am almost done here. Give Morrison another unit of plasma if we have it." Reeves stared at him like he had spoken a foreign language. "Sir, we do not have any more plasma. You used the last 2 bottles on these Germans. Then do what you can. I will be there in 10 minutes. Morrison is dying right now. You are his doctor. You need to be there. I am treating wounded soldiers. That is what I need to be doing. They are not our soldiers. They are the enemy. They are human beings." Reeves took a step forward. His hands were clenched into fists. "Morrison has a mother in Iowa who writes him every week. He has a girl back home who is waiting for him. He has a whole life ahead of him, and he is dying right now because you are too busy saving the men who put that shrapnel in his belly." Wells felt something crack inside him. He wanted to scream that it was not that simple, that medicine did not work like that you could not choose who lived and died based on nationality. But looking at Reeves' face, he knew it did not matter. Nothing he said would matter. "I will be there in 10 minutes, Wells said quietly. He won not last 10 minutes. Reeves turned and ran. Wells stood in the barn full of dying Germans and felt the weight of the choice he had made. He could run to Morrison now, try to save him, probably fail because without plasma there was nothing he could do. Or he could finish here, save the men he could save. Let Morrison die with someone else holding his hand. He kept working, finished bandaging the 5th German, moved to the 6th, 7th. His hand shook, not from cold, from something else, from knowing that every second he spent here was a second Morrison did not have. At 15:05 hours, someone screamed from the other barn, a high, terrible sound that cut through the frozen air. Then silence. Wells stopped moving, stood perfectly still. He knew what that silence meant. Private Morrison from Iowa was dead. The Germans in the barn were looking at Wells. Some of them understood English. They had heard the scream. They knew what had happened. One of their lives had been bought with an American life. Wells wanted to vomit, wanted to walk out of the barn and never come back, wanted to undo the last hour and make different choices. But time only moved forward, and choices could not be unmade. He finished treating the Germans, stabilized 12 of them. The other 11 were beyond help. By 15:50 hours, he had done everything he could. He walked back to the main barn. Morrison lay on the straw-covered floor with a jacket over his face. Dominguez sat against the wall, crying. Reeves stood near the door, staring at Wells with pure hatred. "You killed him," Reeves said. "You chose those Germans over our own guy, and you killed him." Wells said nothing. What could he say? Reeves was right. Major Robert Garrett appeared in the doorway. Garrett was 46 years old, career Army, a man who believed rules existed for a reason. He looked at Morrison's body, looked at Wells. His face was stone. "Captain Wells, you are under arrest for disobedience of orders, unauthorized use of military medical supplies, dereliction of duty, and contributing to the death of an American serviceman. Surrender your sidearm." Wells handed over his pistol. His hands were still shaking. "Did you at least get anything useful from them?" Garrett asked. "Any intelligence that makes this worth it?" Wells looked at the Germans in the other barn. Thought about Kurt Zimmerman and the coordinates and the tank positions. Thought about how that information might save dozens of American lives. Thought about how no one would ever know because intelligence work was classified and buried and forgotten. "Yes, sir," Wells said. "I got intelligence." Garrett studied his face. "Did you pass it up the chain?" "Yes, sir." "Then we will see if it was worth Private Morrison's life." They put Wells in the back of a truck under guard. As the convoy pulled out, he looked back at the two barns. The Germans he had saved would probably survive to be processed as prisoners. Morrison would go home in a box, and Wells would face a court-martial for doing what he thought was right. 3 days later, American artillery would use the coordinates Wells provided to destroy 8 German tanks. The offensive in that sector would stall. Hundreds of American lives would be saved. But nobody would connect those two facts. The intelligence would be filed under classified. the source would be redacted, and Wells would stand trial as a traitor who let an American boy die to save enemy soldiers. Because war was not about nuance, it was about sides. And Wells had chosen the wrong one. February 14th, 1945. 0853 hours. Military Tribunal Courtroom, Reims, France. Catherine Morrison arrived 7 minutes early. She wore a black dress she had bought specifically for this trial because her son was dead, and black was what you wore for the dead. She carried a photograph of Danny in his uniform. The photograph was taken 3 months before he deployed. He was smiling. He looked like a boy pretending to be a soldier. She sat in the front row of the gallery and stared at the empty defendant's table and thought about how she was going to look the man who killed her son in the eyes. The courtroom filled slowly. Officers in dress uniforms, enlisted men who had served with Danny, reporters with notebooks. Everyone wanted to see the trial of the American doctor who chose Germans over his own men. It was the kind of story that sold newspapers and ruined lives. At 0859 hours, they brought in Captain Thomas Wells. He looked smaller than Catherine expected, thinner. His uniform was wrinkled. His face was gray. He walked to the defendant's table, flanked by 2 military police officers, and sat down without looking at the gallery. Catherine wanted him to look at her, wanted him to see what his choices had cost, but he kept his eyes forward. The tribunal convened at exactly 0900 hours. Colonel James Hendricks presiding. 2 lieutenant colonels flanking him. All 3 wore ribbons that showed they had killed men in combat. All 3 looked like they had already decided Wells was guilty before hearing a single word of testimony. This tribunal is convened to try the case of United States versus Captain Thomas Michael Wells, Hendricks said. 4 charges: willful disobedience, unauthorized use of military property, dereliction of duty, conduct resulting in death. Captain Wells, how do you plead? Wells stood. His voice was steady. Not guilty to all charges. The first 2 days of the trial were exactly what Catherine expected. Witnesses testified. Evidence was presented. The story was simple. Wells had disobeyed orders. He had spent 90 minutes treating German prisoners. During that time, her son had died. Corporal Eddie Reeves testified that he had begged Wells to come save Danny, that Wells had refused, that Danny had died alone, calling for his mother. Catherine sat in the front row and listened to how her son spent his final moments and felt something inside her turn to stone. But on the 3rd day, something unexpected happened. Major William Bradford, the prosecutor, called a witness Catherine had not been told about. The prosecution calls Sergeant Kurt Zimmerman. The courtroom went silent. Catherine watched as they brought in a German prisoner of war. He wore an American military prison uniform. He was thin, pale. He walked with a slight limp. When he sat in the witness chair, he looked directly at Wells. Wells looked back. For the first time since the trial started, his face showed emotion. Shock. Maybe fear. Sergeant Zimmerman, Bradford began. You were a prisoner in the barn at Bastogne on December 22nd, 1944? Zimmerman spoke in accented but clear English. Yes. And Captain Wells treated your wounds? Yes. Describe what happened. Zimmerman shifted in his seat. I had been shot in the chest 3 days earlier. Punctured lung. I was dying. Captain Wells came into the barn where we were being held. He gave me plasma, bandages, medicine. He saved my life. Bradford walked closer. Did Captain Wells ask you questions while treating you? Zimmerman hesitated. Yes. What kind of questions? Military questions. About my unit, our positions, our strength. And did you answer these questions? Zimmerman looked at Wells again. Yes. I told him where our tanks were, where our artillery was. I gave him everything he wanted to know. The courtroom erupted, spectators talking, officers leaning forward. Catherine did not understand what was happening. Hendricks banged his gavel. Order, continue Major Bradford. Bradford smiled. He knew he had just destroyed Wells' defense. So Captain Wells was not simply treating wounded prisoners out of humanitarian concern. He was interrogating them, using medical care as leverage to extract military intelligence. Zimmerman frowned. That is not how it was. Then how was it, Sergeant? He saved my life. I gave him information because he earned it, because he treated me like a human being when he could have let me die. Bradford walked back to his table. No further questions. Wells' lawyer, Captain Chen, stood for cross-examination. He looked nervous. Sergeant Zimmerman, the information you gave Captain Wells, was it accurate? Yes. And was it used by American forces? I do not know. I was a prisoner. Chen pulled out a document. This is a classified after-action report from Division Intelligence dated December 25, 1944. It states that coordinates provided by a field source were used to target German armor with artillery fire. 8 tanks were destroyed. Dozens of American lives were saved. Does that sound like the information you provided? Bradford shot to his feet. Objection. That document is classified. It cannot be introduced as evidence. Hendricks looked at Chen. Sustained. The document will not be entered into evidence. Chen tried again. But the information exists. Captain Wells obtained intelligence that saved American lives. Hendricks' voice was ice. Captain Chen, you will confine yourself to questioning the witness. The intelligence value of Captain Wells' actions is not relevant to the charges. How is it not relevant? If Captain Wells was acting as an intelligence officer, he was acting as a medical officer who disobeyed orders. That is what this trial is about. Move on. Chen sat down. Catherine saw Wells put his head in his hands, saw his shoulders shake. The intelligence had been real. It had saved lives. But the tribunal did not care. Zimmerman was still on the stand. He looked at Wells, looked at the judges. Then he said something no one expected. I want to say something. Hendricks frowned. You are dismissed, Sergeant. Please, I need to say this. Sergeant, you are dismissed. Zimmerman stood, but did not leave. He spoke quickly, desperately. Captain Wells did not let my comrades die to save me. He worked on all of us. He used his own supplies, his own time. And yes, he asked questions. But he did it because he was trying to serve both his duty as a doctor and his duty as a soldier. He was trying to save lives and win the war at the same time. That is not betrayal. That is courage. Guards, remove this witness, Hendricks said. 2 military police grabbed Zimmerman. As they dragged him out, he shouted back at the courtroom. Private Morrison died because war kills people, not because Captain Wells tried to save them. Then he was gone. The courtroom was silent. Catherine sat frozen. She had come here believing Wells was a traitor, but now she did not know what to believe. The trial continued. More witnesses, more evidence. On the 4th day, they called Catherine to testify. She walked to the witness stand on legs that felt like they might collapse. She was sworn in. Bradford approached her gently. Mrs. Morrison, tell the tribunal about your son. She looked at the photograph in her hands. Danny was my only child. His father died when he was 6. It was just us. He was kind, gentle. He wanted to be a teacher. He enlisted because he believed it was his duty. Her voice broke. Bradford waited. He wrote me every week about the men in his unit, about Captain Wells. He said Captain Wells was a good doctor. He felt safe. She looked at Wells. He was staring at the table. Did you receive notification of his death? Yes. January. They said he died of wounds. They did not tell me he died while his doctor saved Germans instead. Mrs. Morrison, do you believe Captain Wells is responsible for your son's death? Catherine opened her mouth. The answer should have been simple. Yes, he was responsible. He had made choices, and her son was dead. But sitting here in this courtroom, listening to testimony about intelligence and impossible choices, and men trying to do their duty in circumstances no one should face, she found the answer was not simple at all. I believe my son died in a war, she said quietly. I believe Captain Wells made a choice. Whether it was the right choice, I do not know anymore. Bradford looked shocked. Mrs. Morrison, I came here wanting justice, wanting someone to blame. But blaming Captain Wells will not bring Danny back. It will just destroy another life. And I do not know if that is justice or just more death. She stepped down, walked back to her seat, did not look at anyone. On the fifth day, Wells took the stand. Chen asked him basic questions: background, medical training, service record. Then he asked the question that mattered. Captain Wells, why did you disobey Major Garrett's order? Wells looked at the tribunal. Because I am a doctor, I took an oath. That oath does not stop applying because someone is wearing a different uniform. Even when your own soldiers are dying, even then. Because if I start choosing who deserves medical care based on nationality, I am not a doctor anymore. I am just another soldier killing people. Bradford Cross examined him like a predator. Did you know Private Morrison was in critical condition? I knew he was wounded. Did you know he might die without immediate treatment? War wounds can deteriorate quickly. Yes, I knew it was possible. And you chose to treat Germans instead. I chose to treat the patients in front of me. While an American boy bled to death, Wells' voice rose. Private Morrison died because he had shrapnel in his abdomen, and we were in the middle of a battle with limited supplies and no field hospital within 20 miles. He died because war kills people, not because I tried to save prisoners. You used the last plasma on Germans hours before Morrison started hemorrhaging. If you had saved that plasma, if I had saved it, Morrison might have lived another hour, or he might have died anyway. I do not know. No one knows. But I know for certain that if I had not treated those Germans, 12 of them would have died. 12 human beings who had families and lives and futures. They were enemy soldiers. They were wounded prisoners. There is a difference. Is there? To Private Morrison's mother, is there a difference? Wells looked at Catherine. Their eyes met. She saw guilt there, and pain, and something like a question. I cannot answer that, Wells said quietly. Bradford pressed harder. Captain Wells, you obtained intelligence from Sergeant Zimmerman. Did you report the source of that intelligence? I reported the information to Division Intelligence. Did you tell anyone you had obtained it by offering medical care to prisoners? No. Why not? Because I knew how it would look, like I was using medicine as a weapon, but that is not what I was doing. Then what were you doing? Trying to save lives and serve my country at the same time. Bradford pulled out a letter. This is from Major Robert Clark, Division Intelligence. He states that the information you provided was of minimal value and does not justify your actions. How do you respond? Wells' face went white. That is a lie. Careful, Captain. Major Clark knows the coordinates I provided were used to destroy 8 German tanks. He knows American lives were saved. He is lying to protect his operation because admitting he used a field medic to interrogate prisoners makes the intelligence community look bad. Do you have proof? The after-action reports exist. They are classified, but they exist. Hendricks leaned forward. Captain Wells, this tribunal has reviewed the relevant intelligence files. They do not support your claims. Wells stared at him. You are all lying. The evidence is there. Someone buried it. You are accusing this tribunal of misconduct? I am saying the truth is being hidden because it is inconvenient. The courtroom exploded. Officers shouting, reporters scribbling, Hendricks banging his gavel. When order was restored, Hendricks spoke with cold fury. Captain Wells, you will control yourself or be removed. This tribunal has seen no credible evidence that your intelligence gathering produced significant results. Even if it had, that does not excuse disobedience of orders or dereliction of duty. You let an American soldier die. That is the fact. The verdict will reflect that. The trial ended the next day. The tribunal deliberated for 2 hours. When they returned, Hendricks read the verdict. Guilty on all counts. Dishonorable discharge. Reduction to private. Time served. They stripped Wells of his rank, his uniform, everything. Catherine watched him walk out of the courtroom in civilian clothes, looking like a man who had lost everything. She followed him, caught him in the corridor outside. Captain Wells, he turned. His face was hollow. I need to know something, Catherine said. If you could go back to that day, would you do it differently? He looked at her for a long moment. I would try to save everyone, your son, the Germans, all of them. But with the supplies I had and the time I had, that was not possible. So I saved who I could. If that was wrong, if that makes me a traitor, then I am a traitor. But I would make the same choice again. Even knowing Danny would die, even then, because the alternative is to decide some lives matter more than others. And once you start doing that, you stop being human. Catherine nodded slowly. Then she said something that surprised her. I do not forgive you. I cannot. But I do not hate you either. I think you are a man who was put in an impossible situation and did what you thought was right. That does not bring my son back. But maybe it means something. She walked away, left Wells standing alone in the corridor. 24 years later, the truth would come out. But on that day, in February 1945, Thomas Wells went home in disgrace, carrying secrets that no one would believe. May 17th, 1969. 14:30 hours. Baltimore, Maryland. Thomas Wells was on his knees in a stranger's basement trying to fix a burst pipe when someone knocked on the door upstairs. He was 57 years old. His back hurt. His hands were permanently stained with grease and rust. He made $11 an hour as a plumber, and that was only because the union required it. 24 years ago, he had been a surgeon. Now he fixed toilets. The homeowner, a woman named Mrs. Patterson, called down the stairs. Mr. Wells, there is a man here to see you. Says it is urgent. Wells wiped his hands on a rag, climbed the stairs. His knees popped with every step. In the doorway stood a man he had not seen in 24 years, but recognized immediately. Kurt Zimmerman. He was older, gray at the temples, wearing an expensive suit, but the eyes were the same, gray, steady, the eyes of a man who had looked at death and survived. Hello, Captain Wells, Zimmerman said in accented English. I think we need to talk. They sat in a diner 3 blocks away. Zimmerman ordered coffee. Wells ordered nothing. He could not afford to eat out. Every dollar went to rent and utilities and trying to keep his family afloat on a plumber's salary. "How did you find me?" Wells asked. "It was not easy. The Army does not advertise what happens to dishonorably discharged officers. But I have resources now. Connections. Why were you looking?" "Because 3 weeks ago, I was in Bonn at a NATO conference. I met an American colonel who had served in the Bulge. We talked about the battle, about Bastogne. He mentioned a court-martial, an American medical officer who treated German prisoners and let his own man die. He said it was a scandal, a disgrace. He said your name." Zimmerman paused. "He did not know I was one of the Germans you saved." "I did not tell him. But I went home and started searching, found the trial transcripts, read what they did to you, and I decided I could not let that stand. It has been 24 years. Why does it matter now? Because the truth matters. Because you saved my life, and I destroyed yours by testifying. You told the truth on that stand." "Yes, but I did not tell all of it, and the people who had the rest of the truth chose to bury it." Zimmerman pulled a folder from his briefcase, set it on the table. Inside were documents, official documents, American military documents that should have been classified. "How did you get these?" Wells asked. "I am a member of the Bundestag now, West German Parliament. I have access to NATO Joint Intelligence files. These are American after-action reports from December 1944. Your division, your intelligence. Look at page 4. Wells read. His hand started shaking. The document was dated December 25, 1944. Subject: artillery strike on enemy armor southeast of Bastogne. It described coordinates provided by a field source, described 8 German tanks destroyed, described a counterattack broken, described American lives saved. Wells' voice was barely a whisper. They had this, the whole time. They had proof that the intelligence was real. Yes, and they buried it. Because acknowledging it would mean admitting they used a field medic to interrogate prisoners. Would mean admitting they court-martialed you for doing exactly what they wanted you to do. It was easier to make you the villain. Wells pushed the folder away. What do you want from me? I want to make this public. I want to tell the world what really happened, that you were not a traitor, that you saved lives on both sides, that the American army lied. Wells laughed. It was a bitter sound. No one will care. It was 24 years ago. The war is over. I am nobody. You are a hero who was destroyed by his own government. People will care. My family has lived with shame for 24 years. My wife left me. My children will not speak to me. My daughter tells people her father is dead. Digging this up will not fix that. It will just make everything worse. Or it will give you your life back. I do not have a life to get back. I have a basement apartment and a plumbing job and nothing else. Leave it alone. Zimmerman leaned forward. His voice was hard. Captain Wells, 12 men are alive because of you. I am alive because of you. My daughter grew up with a father because you gave me plasma when you should have let me die. I will not let the world believe you were a coward. I am going public with this, with or without your permission. Wells stared at him. Then he said something he had not said to anyone in 24 years. Do you know how many times I have thought about killing myself? How many nights I have sat in my apartment with a bottle of pills, wondering if it would be easier to just stop existing? The only thing that kept me alive was knowing that if I died, Morrison's mother would think she won, that she would think justice was served. I stayed alive out of spite. That is all I have left. Zimmerman reached across the table, put his hand on Wells' arm. Then let me give you something else. Let me give you the truth. 3 days later, Kurt Zimmerman held a press conference in Washington. He stood at a podium in front of 30 reporters and told them everything about the barn, about Wells saving his life, about the intelligence, about the buried documents, about the lie that destroyed an innocent man. The story exploded. Newspapers picked it up. Television news ran segments. Within a week, Congress announced an investigation. The Army was forced to respond. Wells watched it happen from his apartment, watched his name on television, watched people arguing about whether he was a hero or a criminal, watched his past dragged into the present where everyone could see it. His daughter Sarah called him for the first time in 8 years. She was 32 now, married, had children Wells had never met. "Is it true?" she asked. "Did you really save all those people?" "Yes. Why did you never tell us? Who would have believed me?" She was crying. "I would have believed you. We all would have. But you just let us think you were a coward. Let us spend our whole lives ashamed of you. I tried to protect you from the truth, tried to let you move on. We did not want to move on. We wanted a father." She hung up. Wells sat in his apartment and wondered if telling the truth had been the right choice after all. The congressional investigation took 6 months. Subpoenas were issued. Documents were declassified. Major Robert Clark, now retired, was called to testify. He admitted that the intelligence Wells provided had been used, admitted it had saved lives, but he claimed the decision to classify it had been made by someone above him, someone who was now dead and could not contradict him. The investigation concluded that Wells had been wrongly convicted, that evidence had been suppressed, that justice had been denied. But the Army refused to overturn the court-martial, refused to restore his rank, refused to acknowledge that they had destroyed an innocent man. A spokesman released a statement. While Captain Wells' actions may have had some intelligence value, he still disobeyed direct orders and contributed to the death of Private Morrison. The court-martial verdict was appropriate under the circumstances at the time. The Army stands by its decision. Zimmerman was furious. He appeared on every news program that would have him. He called the Army cowards. He demanded Wells be restored and honored. But the Army did not move, could not move. Because admitting they were wrong about Wells meant admitting how many other court-martials might have been wrong, meant opening a door they could not close. In December 1969, Wells received a letter from the Secretary of the Army. It was 3 paragraphs long. It apologized for the classified evidence not being available at trial. It acknowledged that Wells had provided valuable intelligence. It expressed regret for the hardship he had endured. But it did not clear his name, did not restore his discharge status, did not give him back anything he had lost. Wells read the letter twice, then he threw it away. In January 1970, Catherine Morrison contacted him. She was 67 years old now, a widow, still living in Iowa. She asked if they could meet. They sat in the same diner where Wells had met Zimmerman. Catherine looked older, but her eyes were the same, still carrying the weight of her son's death. "I read about the investigation," she said, "about the intelligence you gathered, about the lies." Wells said nothing. "I want you to know I do not blame you anymore. I have not blamed you for a long time. But I could never tell you that because I thought it would feel like betraying Danny, like saying his death did not matter." "His death mattered," Wells said. "I know, but so do you. You are not the man who killed my son. You are the man who tried to save everyone and could not. I am sorry I helped destroy you. You did not destroy me. You told the truth as you saw it. I cannot fault you for that." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Catherine asked the question Wells had been asking himself for 24 years. "Do you think Danny would forgive you?" Wells thought about the 19-year-old kid from Iowa who had died calling for his mother. Thought about the choice he had made. Thought about the 12 Germans who lived because of it. "I do not know," Wells said, "but I hope so." Catherine reached across the table, took his hand. "For what it is worth, I forgive you. And I think Danny would too." She left. Wells sat alone in the diner and cried for the first time since the trial. His life did not get better. The investigation changed public opinion, but it did not change reality. He was still a plumber, still disgraced in the eyes of the military, still broken. His wife Helen called him in 1971, asked if they could try again, try to rebuild what the war had destroyed. Wells said no. Too much time had passed. Too much damage had been done. They divorced officially 6 months later, but his children came back, slowly. Sarah brought her kids to meet him. His son Michael started calling every week. They did not have a relationship, but they had something, a foundation to build on. In 1974, at age 62, Thomas Wells died of a heart attack in his apartment. He was alone. The plumbing company held a small service. 40 people attended. Zimmerman flew from Germany. Catherine Morrison came from Iowa. Wells' children were there. Some of his former medics showed up. Men who had testified against him 29 years earlier and had lived with that guilt ever since. No one from the army attended. No flag was placed on his coffin. He was buried in a civilian cemetery with a simple headstone that read, "Thomas Michael Wells, Doctor, 1912 to 1974. The story should have ended there, but in 2001, 27 years after Wells died, something unexpected happened. The German Bundestag passed a resolution honoring Thomas Wells posthumously. They awarded him the Cross of Merit of the Federal Republic of Germany for saving German lives during the war. Kurt Zimmerman, now 82 years old and still serving in Parliament, gave a speech. "Captain Wells taught me that humanity does not end at national borders, that a doctor's oath is more important than a general's order, that doing the right thing sometimes costs everything. Germany honors him today not because he was German, but because he was human. We should all aspire to his courage." Sarah Wells accepted the medal on her father's behalf. She was 64 years old. She stood at the podium in the Bundestag and said the words her father never got to hear. "My father spent his life believing he was a failure, believing he had betrayed his country and lost his honor. I wish he could have lived to see this moment, to know that someone remembered the truth, to know that his choice mattered." The American government did not comment. The Army did not change his discharge status. The court-martial was never overturned. But the 12 men Wells saved, the 8 German tanks destroyed by his intelligence, the hundreds of American lives preserved by his actions, those were the truth. And truth has a way of surviving even when everything else is destroyed. Thomas Wells died disgraced, but he did not die wrong.